Greetings, and thank you for joining the Capstone group for this important Zoom event. Before we get to our main presentation, a bit about the Capstone group. We were founded in August of 2018, inspired by the Howard University student protests that took place earlier that year. We are a dynamic collaborative of Howard University alumni, faculty, students, staff, and community that proactively address issues relevant to the Howard University community. We provide an empowering platform to exchange ideas and experiences to affect positive change. Now, sit back and enjoy the presentation. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Well, thank you for spending some time with us in the Capstone Lounge. We'll get into our main program right now. And I want to thank everybody who has joined us this morning from far around the globe, from Sweden, from Cyprus, from Nigeria, from Senegal, from the Caribbean. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is all about a Howard celebration, what Howard means to me. It's given us family, it's given us opportunities, built foundations, and enabled us to move on and experience different things in our lives. We often gather in settings like this, virtually and in person, and we chat and share with each other. Do you remember when that particular experience may have occurred while you were a student at Howard or visiting over the course of the years as it's a homecoming experience? Some of us are 40, some 30, some 20, some maybe even 60 or 70 years from the time that we had put foot on the campus. So today's a celebration of that experience, and the Capstone Group is honored to have our guest presenters from Antigua, Ariana Black. From Nigeria, we're hoping Nawaji Jubano will join us. He's had a couple challenges technically. From Senegal, Tiana Stewart. From Sweden, Adrian Lynn. And from the United Kingdom, we have Kim Jack Riley. So today we're hosting what would be our third annual Bison Abroad program. This came about during COVID, but we found this to be a very powerful opportunity to engage with other Bisons living abroad. And the question has come up, especially in the past few years, would you enjoy your best life if you were living, studying, retired, or working abroad? Well, over the past few years, we've had several guest speakers. Coming to us from Ghana was Janetta Nazali, who's an educator. In Japan, we had Karsi Hall, PhD, who's a professional engineer working for the Marines in Okinawa, Japan. We had Troy White in Kenya. He was in Nairobi. He's a lifestyle marketing and virtual reality specialist, bringing technology to Africa. From Kuwait, we had Debbie Williams living in Kuwait City, who's an educator, a radio personality, and a general global traveler. We had in Mexico City, we had Erica Rendezvous, who is an empowerment specialist and is owner of a conference empowerment program. In Panama this morning, we also have Ife and Damani Keene, who are currently living in Punta Chame in Panama. So we'll be able to talk to some of these folks and exchange some of their previous experience. In Senegal, we also had another speaker last year, Tony Blockman, and Tony was the first cultural ambassador on hip hop that the US government posted from the State Department. So if you were wondering about our theme this morning, one of the things that we asked our guest presenters to do is to share with us some of the cultural things going on in their communities. What's popular on their radio? What is it that they're doing in terms of celebrating each other in their communities? And the theme was specifically what you saw today, hip hop, music, the universal language. So as we get into our program this morning, we'll be able to talk and dive a little bit deeper into that process. So coming to the table this morning is, again, Ariana Black from Antigua, Tiana Stewart from Senegal, Adrian George Lynn from Sweden, and King Jack Riley, who's posted in the UK, but I think Kim's coming from us from Cyprus this morning. So Bisons are walkabout people, kind of like what they say about Jamaicans. Jamaicans are walkabout people. You find them everywhere. So I'm pretty sure everywhere on the planet right now, you could find somebody who's had an experience at Howard University or as a Howard University member. At this point, I'd like to share the platform with my colleague and have him introduce himself, Shawande Chinoa. Shawande?
Hey everyone, it's Jawande T'Challa, and I am a board member of the Capstone Group. I had the pleasure of hosting this for I believe the last 2 years, and again this year. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good, good. So I am excited to bring to you for the third time in the organization's history, and one of our more popular panels, the Bison Abroad, and you will definitely receive some valuable insight about bison who are living all throughout the diaspora, and not only the diaspora, but in European countries as well. We have the pleasure of bringing you Ariana Black, who's in Antigua, Nwaji Jibunu, who is having some connection issues. He's trying to dial direct, if that's a message for our tech team. So hopefully, he can get in. Ariana Black is allied health sciences graduate of Howard University. She got her bachelor's in health science with a concentration in physician's assistant studies, and she's currently living in St. John's, Antigua. Her intention is to become a pediatric surgeon with a focus on cardiothoracic and neurosurgery disciplines. And currently, she's dedicated her studies and continues her journey as a medical student. So she's now enrolled at the American University of Antigua, and she's an active member of Phi Delta Epsilon International Medical Fraternity and Association. So prior to embarking on her pursuit, intensive medical training, her career included serving as an early childhood educator and peer tutor. So other interests include modeling, nutrition, and traveling. We also are pleased to welcome Kim Jack Riley for, I believe, the first time in a Capstone event. And she's a leading travel marketing and hospitality specialist with expertise spanning integrated marketing, digital content. Proud Bison, she says, of her time at Howard University and her life at Meridian Hill, the School of Journalism, and the Hill newspaper, which gave her foundation. So I can relate because I'm also a School of Communications grad. She was born and raised in London, and she moved to the U.S. with her parents, and while in this country, attended Howard University. So it was a perfect launch pad for her discovery. And although writing and journalism is her first love, print and publishing was beginning to fade out when the digital world started blossoming. So she had to adjust and make that transition. And she was the editorial director for NBC Universal, to hit up the emerging websites, which included a travel site. So you can kind of make those connections to why she is currently in her current role. And we're loving to get to hear more of that. And just on a personal note, she's married to New York journalist Mark Riley. They have a daughter, Vivica, who graduated from the University of Colorado Boulder, and then they repatriated back to the UK. So that should be interesting to hear those comparisons with life in the home of her birth, now that she got to get a taste of life here in the U.S. And Nwaji Jibuno is expert MC and a management consultant and a retreat facilitator. Hopefully, he is joined us by now. I know he was having some connection issues.
He has, Jawanda, he's here.
Okay, great, great. And so he's also what you won't read on his bio is that he is also the president. I don't know if he still is, but I know that he was the president of the Howard University Alumni Association in Nigeria. Um, and he has a bachelor's degree in business administration. And next slide. Oh, okay. All right. And Adrienne Lynn um, is my homegirl. She's Washington, D.C. I'm just going to put that in there because, that's how we do when we're from the nation's capital. Her parents met at Howard University, so she's a legacy. Her parents met at Howard University in the 50s, and along with her sister and cousins, she has attended HU in the 80s, along with me. So she's in my class. While enrolled in undergrad, Adrienne married and earned degrees from the University of the District of Columbia, American University, and Boston University in Brussels, Belgium. She's married to a Swedish military officer and is the founder of the multi-award winning blog Black Women in Europe. And for those who are interested, they can click on the link and or copy and paste that link and check out her podcast. Tiana Stewart earned her BS in Human Development from Howard University in 2018. She's one of the younger alums here on this panel, and her MS in nonprofit management from Columbia University as an HBCU fellow, and currently she's in Dakar, Senegal. So Tiana and Tony Blackman, y'all need to hook up. Tiana works independently as a nonprofit consultant. She's working on becoming fluent in Wolof and French as she intends to make Senegal her home. And this is a little side note. One of the words we use in English on a regular basis is rooted in Senegal. And it's the Wolof word yes. In English, it's wow. Yeah. So anyway, with one of her clients, Save a Girl, Save a World, she's the project coordinator for the Speak Up Project, the smoking prevention and tobacco control advocacy initiative for young women on HBCU campuses. Prior to consulting, she was a youth advocacy program associate at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. In this role, she supported strategic outreach and engagement with communities disproportionately impacted by tobacco use and predatory marketing. So we know whenever there's predatory marketing, what neighborhoods they target. In early 2020, Tiana was a Peace Corps trainee in Senegal, but her service as a community economic development volunteer was cut short due to COVID-19. And Tiana is passionate about youth and community development, held positions at the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, Firelight Media, the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, and DC Public Schools throughout her undergraduate and graduate matriculation. So Tiana enjoys hobbies like DJing, tie-dye, and skateboarding. Now that's across some different platforms. That'd be interesting to hear how that intersects, Tiana.
Things that you'll see is the fact
Oh.
that Howard has a very broad pool from which it draws, and the current population on campus, the enrollment is 12,000 students in undergraduate and graduate and professional programs, representing 53 states and territories, as well as 53 nations. So as the world expands and we get to the numbers where we're seeing on the screen, where we're in the billions of people, there's a Howardite somewhere in that community that's making a difference. So our conversations this morning is going to range on a number of different topics to get the presenters to share with us their experience of living as a bison abroad. So we'll be discussing some notable trends in their regions, and some of the presenters have information that they will be sharing with us. So we'll kick it off, Shawande, with Ariana, and then go from there.
So, Ariana, you are up.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for
Hi.
joining us today. Hi. I'm coming live from Antigua, of course. I would like to first start with acknowledging Howard for my foundation. I'm so grateful for the unparalleled experience that I've had there. It's propelled me to where I am today, so I'm really excited to be joining now for homecoming. I'll start with traveling to Antigua, just so you guys get an idea of what that might be like when you're interested in visiting. So for right now, I believe that it's just still COVID testing, which may be lifted as well, because as of September, I want to say, they just lifted the mask mandates. So the health and wellness over here is pretty well covered. They make sure that people still wear their masks, even though it's not required. And, hand sanitizer stations are everywhere. So it should be pretty easy if you wanted to travel, you just need your passport and a test. The island offers 365 beaches. It's a very small island, but that's their claim to fame, one for every day. As far as culture and kindness goes, the people are very, very warm and welcoming, which was a pleasant surprise when I first came. Everyone's very kind and helpful, and you just find that no matter where you go, it's almost like they treat you like family immediately. I'm here for my education. I'm here for school. I'm pursuing my medical career. I'm in medical school at American University of Antigua. It's a very well-established school with ties internationally. While I was here, I was able to join the medical fraternity of Phi Delta Epsilon, which has been a great experience because with that networking opportunity, I'm able to connect worldwide, but also with people that are in the medical profession specifically. So I'm really excited for that. Entertainment here is, I would say, really the beaches is the biggest thing to do. They also have a pretty well-known worldwide carnival, which is held in August. So that's what people kind of plan year-round around. The cost of living here is a little expensive, I would say, for some things like food or things that get imported because they have to pay for the shipping and the clearance and everything. But as far as cost of housing and things that are established here, like if I were to go to a market or something, it's a little bit better economically. I'll touch on the energy in the geopolitical topic because I live very close to the airport, and near the airport, they have solar panels. So when you drive, I would say, I'm not sure how long it is, but a giant field of solar panels. And I know that they're working on more solar powered energy as well, which is really nice to see. And I would say that my future here holds a couple of years. I'll be here for probably at least 2 years. So whenever you guys anyone is thinking about coming to visit or is interested in knowing anything more, I'd be so happy to share. And thank you all for having me.
Great. So I'm sure that I'm going to keep it short because I want our guests to chime in with their questions, and guess you can put it in the chat. But what are what was like the major difference that you experienced when you moved?
That's a very good question. I would say that there's a few things. I did have experience living in Jamaica as well. And I would say the difference of moving from the United States is different from moving from Jamaica, because it's very similar to Jamaica in a lot of aspects as far as the Caribbean life. It's just, how do I explain it? I would say, I don't want to say like not as technologically advanced, but I do feel like in the United States, we have a lot more just like mega buildings and skyscrapers and things like that. Here you see things that are like more natural, and they tend to do things like more holistically. which is really nice to experience. So I would say that the transition is a little bit different with how they handle their businesses and maybe how they may do some medical practices, but overall it's really nice, and I think that everyone who gets the chance to experience it would really enjoy
What's the healthcare system like there?
their healthcare system. So as a student, they do offer insurance to all students, which is good because they make sure that everyone is covered. And I would say that it's very nice, and it's pretty easy to go ahead and make an appointment. They're very accommodating. They have everything we could ever think of, from acupuncture to therapy and any kind of specialists that you may need to see. So it's actually very good overall.
How's how's the weather?
Oh, it's beautiful all year round. I mean, I think that Antigua is known for the land of sun and water. And it's very accurate in that, because the sun, when it shines, it's just incredible. It's like always golden hour. It's almost glowing. It's something like I've never seen before. And I do get to go to the islands a lot. Antigua is actually, I guess, joined with Barbuda. So it's Antigua and Barbuda, but it's two separate islands. And in Barbuda, they have the pink sand beaches. So you could just imagine, how nice and serene it is over here by the beach,
Okay,
especially.
okay, and that we got a question from Chris King. How does school life differ when you can go to the beach at any time?
It's a good balance. It's a great balance. I have really big exams, and then after the exam, I make sure I bring my bathing suit with me, and I'm like, okay, after this, I'm going to go to the beach and we're going to celebrate and just relax. It's nice to have that ability to work hard and be in school, and then go and lay out by the pool or by the beach or anything. It's really cool.
And
I love it.
our vice president Saquon Shaw wants to know what advice you would give to someone who wants to experience life abroad but is afraid to do so. What's the first step one should take?
Hmm. I would say that there's there shouldn't be any fear. Fear is something that you just create in your mind. So whatever you think that may be going on, I would say that there's always a way to make it work. Like, I would definitely take every opportunity if you did have it, and just have that experience, because you can grow, you can learn a lot, and you can experience the different cultures, which, again, something that, I mean, we have the whole world. It's something that I would want to do again and again, even beyond Antigua as well. I'm interested in practicing medicine internationally. So I would say go for it, and make sure that you kind of have an idea of what you would like to do when you get there. That way that when you get there, you're kind of, and already starting into your routine, and then it will just become like second nature for you.
And one of our founding Capstone members, Dr. Velma Lapointe, wants to know what is public safety like there? Like, what is crime? How does
Oh,
crime
okay.
factor into it?
Yes. So when I did arrive at the island, they had the police force come and speak to us. And from what I know, they are very much involved. I would say that the crime is very minimal. Honestly, I feel very safe here, which is nice. They say that you would be okay to, walk around by yourself at night, which is something that I wouldn't really do by myself. I would do it with a friend if I ever had to, but it's nice to know that you're safe. I don't really think that the crime is something that you worry about. If I've ever heard anything, it's probably like a car accident that happened, or maybe something one-on-one personal, but overall in general, like, the people are very kind and there's not very much crime
Okay.
here in Antigua.
And Denise Hawkins wants to know if you can suggest safe and good places to stay outside of typical hotels, like especially if you're traveling alone.
Oh, okay. Outside of the typical hotels. Okay. They do have a few villas that they offer, if that's something that you might be interested in. A little bit of a step up from an Airbnb kind of situation. Um, I know that they have, okay, I don't want to give you hotels, but I know that they have things that are easy access to where you can get into the town, you can get into the city, you can go to the beach. Because like I said, the island is very small. I believe it's, from what it was quoted, it was about 10 by 12 miles. So to get from one side of the island to the other would only take about 45 minutes to an hour. So within that span, I would say probably something near the beach as far as a villa would go would be perfect, besides hotels.
All right. So, is there any any final words
Any,
of encouragement or advice that you would have for a potential bison who's contemplating living there in Antigua?
yes, I would say that please reach out to me. I'm here in any way that you need, any capacity, even if it's, in reference to anything. And I would say you'll really like it. So my advice is to go for it, get the experience, and call me if you need anything.
All right. So you all heard that, guys, and if things are going the way that they're going
To my
here,
WhatsApp.
I'm sorry, say
Yes,
that
you
again.
add my WhatsApp number. Somebody asked in the group chat, can you share the contact info? So I'll add that now into the chat.
Okay. Thanks, Ariana. Hang around for the rest of the program if you can. Next, we're going to
Absolutely.
Tiana.
Thank you.
I have to start with a greeting. Greetings are very important in Senegal. It's a way to show respect and appreciation, whether somebody crossing on the street, or your friend or family. So some people, I think I saw in the comments, some people have been to Senegal, so they may know the response. So feel free to get off on mute if you know. But so when you greet somebody, you generally say salam alaikum, and the response to that is malaikum salam, which essentially just means peace be upon you and may peace return to you. There are a lot of Arabic words that are borrowed in Wolof because of the Muslim influence. And then typically in response to that, you'll hear Nanga Def, which means how are you? And the response to that is Mangi Fi, which is I am here and it's good to be here because you can maybe be sick or be elsewhere. So that's a way to express that you're doing fine. So to introduce myself again, my name is Tiana Stewart-Toe. I'm class of 2018. I'm proud School of Education graduate. I've majored in human development. Went on to get my master's in Columbia, at Columbia Nonprofit Management. And I currently work as a nonprofit consultant. And he gave a pretty good rundown in my bio, so I won't reiterate too much on that. But I'll start with getting to know Senegal. It is a West African country, as you can see the red country there. Relatively small population of 17.7 million. The capital is Dakar, which is where I live. And Dakar is the closest point, westernmost point, and closest to the US. So the flight is only about 7.5 hours. Depending on how comfortable you are with flights that may be longer or maybe long, but it's 7.5 hours from New York, a direct flight. The major languages are Wolof and French. So in terms of officially, the French is used often in business and in school, but generally everybody speaks Wolof. Religiously, 97% of the population practices Islam, while 2.8% practice Christianity. But one thing that's important to note about Senegal is it's very religiously tolerant. So although there's a large majority of people who are Muslim, there's a lot of tolerance, even within families. You have some people who are Muslim, some people are Christian, and come and share meals together, and there's no problems there. Cost of living, and it's one of the most expensive African cities. I think most recently I thought it was top of the list, from what I saw when I looked it up a couple of weeks ago. But it's relatively, speaking, especially coming from the US, the dollar can go far, but it is one of the most expensive African cities. So that's a little bit of a rundown in terms of COVID. Things were pretty well contained here. You do still have to have a COVID test to enter, or either a vaccine, fully vaccinated, or a COVID test. But other than that, COVID was pretty well contained compared, especially relatively speaking. So I'm gonna use kind of my journey through starting at Howard to illustrate my relationship with Senegal. If it wasn't for Howard, I know that I wouldn't have ended up where I am today. So the seed was planted by my big cousin. Her name is Yasmin. She was class of 2001. So that's me at about 5 years old at her graduation. And then fast forward 17 years later, that's me with her daughter, who was the same age that I was in the picture to the left. So it's a family legacy. And if it wasn't for her and her following her footsteps, it definitely set off the chain of that I'm on now. So I started out in the School of Business. If you were in the SOB, you know those suits very well. And I was an accounting major, but quickly realized that that wasn't quite for me. I had an internship and came back my sophomore year and switched to the School of Education. So in the School of Education, I had to pick up a minor. So I picked up French, which I had taken since 8th grade. And it was a beautiful thing being a part of the French program at Howard, because as you can see on the left, that was my experience of French before coming to Howard. And on the right, I was opened up to Afro-Francophone countries, Afro-Caribbean countries, and authors. And it gave me a new relationship with the language. And it became something where I felt like I was gaining access to my culture and my roots. And in my senior year, I took a class with Dr. Karen Wallace in the French department. And some of my classmates were going on and on about how much they loved the study abroad program they participated in Senegal. And even though I was a senior, I was about to graduate and head off to graduate school. I wanted the experience of studying abroad, so I decided to go for it. And of course, unfortunately, it wasn't covered by my scholarship, but thankfully my parents were supportive. So my parents helped me with the fees, and my grandmother bought my plane ticket, and I was off to Dakar in 2018. So here's some pictures from that experience. You see, I was repping Howard. That was one of my first days there. So in that experience, I had an internship with the publishing company. And overall, it was my first experience, first of all, traveling to the African continent. So there was the connection and feeling like, okay, this is where some of my roots are from. And then, of course, experiencing Senegalese culture for the first time, which is very peaceful and loving. It's a country known for peace. When you're speaking in the language and the feel, and also the spirituality, there's a sense of peace that I was able to tap into and didn't expect. So the bug bit me then, but I had to go off to graduate school at Columbia. So although it was a great opportunity, I was able to participate in the HBCU fellowship, and I was studying nonprofit management, and it was fully funded. But at the end of that program, I felt like I was still missing something. I was going along the track of what I was supposed to do: go to school, get a job, make my parents proud. And I realized that I was a little bit feeling dissatisfied or unfulfilled in the work that I was pursuing. So it popped back in my head, the Senegal and the culture, and I decided to pursue the Peace Corps. So as I mentioned in my bio, that I was in the Peace Corps. I was set to serve for 27 months. I was living in Senegal. I had a new name. I was living with the family, and after only 30 days, COVID hit and we were all evacuated. So that sent me reeling. And although I was enjoying the experience, I was sent back to Virginia with my family and kind of starting from square one again. And so I was on unemployment, trying to figure out my next moves, eventually able to get a job, move back up to DC area. And I felt like, okay, I made it, I'm settled again. And then life threw some more curveballs, and I had to kind of sit and reflect and say, okay, what do I want in life? What am I searching for? And Senegal, of course, popped back in my mind. I turned to my journals during that time and realized that I had a deep desire to travel independently. I kind of kept choosing the safe route of how to make it to Senegal through study abroad and through the Peace Corps. And although those were great introductions, I felt that I had to take a leap. So I took that leap, quit my job, broke my lease in my apartment, and reached out to a close friend of mine who I met in Senegal my first day, and decided to take a trip in the summer of 2020. Time is flying. So in that trip, I called to give myself permission, because instead of waiting for a program to sanction it or get permission from family or approval, I decided to go independently. And during this trip, I was able to reconnect with all of the families who hosted me. So from left to right, it was my first host family, my Peace Corps training family, and then one of the staff members from the Peace Corps who was kind of a mother figure for us volunteers during that time. And additionally, in that trip, I got to reconnect with someone else who was a connection I made during my first trip, and I didn't expect to blossom. So in that experience, this was going from 2018. We kept being able to reconnect, and he is now my husband. He's Senegalese, and we met in Dakar in 2018, and were able to stay connected. But it wasn't until last summer when I took that leap of faith that we were able to reconnect and blossom into becoming husband and wife. And we were married the end of December. So that's what brought me back to Senegal the top of this year, January 1st. We decided to live in Senegal and make Senegal our home. For me, it was very important to learn the language and culture, and I love the country. So that was the next best step for us. So I've been living in Dakar for 8 months, and here are some pictures, some of the kind of highlight reels. But in the corner, I have a Wolof phrase, which is "Ndunk Ndunk," which means slowly but surely. And it kind of encapsulates my journey living abroad. It's something that I want to be fully transparent. It's not always an easy process to learn a new language. And in my case, learning 2 languages at once, to be coming into a new culture, a new country. But even through all of those challenges of sometimes feeling isolated or feeling frustrated or embarrassed by not being able to express myself, even through those challenges, with the support of my family and friends, I've been able to enjoy getting out and about in Senegal. So you see me DJing at an art exhibit. There's a really bustling art scene in Senegal. And I was also able to volunteer with a summer camp. That's me in the bottom with some kids, and I led a tie-dye training. And overall, what I want to express is that although it hasn't always been easy, I think following my heart and having faith is what allowed this experience to blossom as it has. And for anybody looking for advice or thinking about taking the leap, I definitely recommend traveling, first of all, but also trusting yourself and having a support system that can help you through the hard times, because it won't always be easy. But as I look at these pictures, it's hard to believe that it's only been 9 months of me living here. And I can't wait to see what the future brings. So it hasn't only been something that's opened up my life, it's also opened up the life for my family. And thankfully, my family was able to make a trip to Senegal just a couple of months ago. So here's some pictures of that. And the picture in the middle is my grandmother, who actually brought my plane ticket when I decided to come the first time. So it was a very humbling experience to be able to host them and bridge our 2 families. And it's become, in the bottom right corner, you see a picture of a land, and that's actually land that my parents have purchased. And Senegal has become their retirement plan. So it hasn't only opened up new pathways in my life, but also legacy for my family. So this is my journey in Senegal so far, and I feel like I'm just getting started, but I'm happy to be able to share with you all a little bit about what I'm doing here. So I want to say thank you. Here's my contact information, and I close it out instead of saying goodbye. This is Baba Nignon. Till next time, inshallah, God willing. So thank you all, and I'm looking forward to any questions.
Thank you, Tiana. We're going to hold the questions for now because we've got a couple people that have shaky internet connections. So I want to ensure that Nawaji, who's been challenged with getting online, has an opportunity to address this platform. So Nawaji, if you are ready, we are looking so forward to hearing from you. And you missed it when we played Burna Boy this morning. So please, if your mic is working, you can hear us, can you pick up the mic? And then I'd like to go to Adrian. And if you have questions in the meantime, please put them in the chat. We're going to give folks a chance to speak with the panelists, but I want to make sure the folks whose technology is unstable get a chance to present this morning. So Nawaji, it's all yours.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Okay, great. Yes, I have been having issues with my internet for a couple of days now. So I apologize about not putting my video on. I think that it's just better if we just manage the bandwidth just so that I can speak directly. I hope that's okay with everyone. So thank you so much to everyone for putting this together. It's always a pleasure to do anything for Howard. And also just listening to the fellow panelists speak on their experiences living abroad and everything else. And I believe my bio has been briefly touched on. And I think, my perspective is very different, primarily because I arrived in the United States, when I think about it now, almost 30 years ago, as a high school student in Atlanta, Georgia. My father is an engineer. He's a mechanical engineer by trade, and he was doing some consulting work in Atlanta, Georgia, which is what took our family there. And my brother and I ended up finishing high school. And during that time in high school, before we got to the States, because we were in the United Kingdom before we moved to the States, in your typical British boarding school, and then prior to that, we had lived in Nigeria. So arriving to the States, our perceptions of the US, especially Black America, was very skewed and limited from the perspectives of the Cosby Show in a Different World and other characters, through the media and everything else. But obviously, when we got to Atlanta, things shaped differently. We got to learn about the HBCU experience, and which is what ultimately led my brother and I ended up at Howard University. And at Howard, my life completely changed with the kind of people that I met and the kind of experiences that I had, the education, within the classroom and outside the classroom, and then the lifelong friendships that I built during that time, which I still have till today. And Howard definitely shaped not only my personal life, my personal journey, my values and things that I hold dear to myself now, but it also shaped my professional career as a management consultant coming out of the School of B, and then also pursuing that career, in Nigeria and West Africa and Europe. So I think just to go through the format of Nigeria, my perspective is a little bit different because, I'm speaking at it from the perspective of, a Nigerian, because obviously that shapes my reality regarding how I see the world, how I see Nigeria. But also at the same time, having had a brief US experience, I can also speak to an understanding of some of the things to look out for and everything else. So culturally speaking, Nigeria is a lot of people don't know this, is probably one of the most culturally diverse countries on the planet. We have over 250 unique ethnicities and languages within Nigeria. It's a very big country, over 200 million people spread across these 250 unique ethnicities and languages. So that in itself is a beautiful thing, but it can also be somewhat chaotic from an identity point of view, because the question now becomes, what does it mean to be Nigerian? What does it mean to have that national identity? Because Nigeria obviously is a created state, is artificial boundaries that were put together by the British colonial government over 100 years ago, and it's something that the independence fighters just kind of inherited and wanted to build a nation from. And we've pretty much struggled with that identity, because when you look at these cultures, they are very uniquely different. In sense of language and culture and nuance and everything else you can think of. So that is what has led to a lot of the challenges that we've had with civil war and just ethnic conflicts, and just trying to build a national identity that thrives economically and everything else. But within that comes a beautiful amount of different experiences that you can have in Nigeria, within Nigeria. Especially when you look at just what the different ethnic groups have to offer, depending on the region that you are in, depending on the experiences that you are in. You can have a very uniquely different experience dealing with somebody who is Yoruba, dealing with somebody who is Igbo, dealing with somebody that is Hausa, dealing with somebody that is Ibibio. Nigeria is just that diverse, and all of these unique cultures present very wonderful, unique experiences. Everything from food to traditional ceremonies, to yam festivals, to weddings, to how when children are born, how we name them. And I think for me, even though as a young individual, my world was very shaped from the ethnic background that I came from, but I think having gone to Howard and come back to Nigeria to live, I've had a deeper appreciation for my fellow countrymen's diversity when it comes to ethnicity and the different things that it has to offer. So I think culturally for me, I love the vastness and the variety of the Nigerian culture, because I definitely feel that it has a lot to offer. And I also think from a diaspora perspective, when you now begin to look at the proportion of slaves that came from Nigeria to the Americas, which is South America, which is the Caribbean, and then obviously the southern part of the United States, you will see that majority of those individuals came from the Badagry slave coast, which is not one of the, it's interesting that it's not now known as one of the most popular slave coast. I heard a previous speaker speak about Senegal. When you look at the slave coast in Senegal, I can't remember the name now, but the one on the furthermost point, Goree Island, and then you look at the other ones in Ghana and different places. But Badagry slave coast was the busiest, was the biggest, because that's where you had the sheer number of millions of slaves that came from the interior part of Nigeria go through that slave coast and were shipped off to the Caribbean, to Brazil, and eventually, I think, Charleston, South Carolina. So I bring that up to say that if I always tell a lot of African Americans that if you want to find the essence of who you are in terms of just some things that you consider spiritual and genetic, you can definitely find it in Nigeria. There's this running joke that I've always had from a population perspective that 1 out of every 7 Black people in the globe is from Nigeria, just primarily when you look at those numbers. So if you put any amount of Black people in the room, they're Nigerian by default, whether by nationality, geographical location, or just by their ancestral ties. So that's it culturally. Nigeria is a very interesting, I call it very tolerant, intolerant society. So tolerant in the sense of, if you come to Nigeria wanting to learn, wanting to embrace, wanting to be part of the culture, Nigerians will adopt you on that first day. They'll give you a name. People will let you stay at their house. They'll be beyond friendly to you and take you as family. But at the same time, if you come with any kind of perspective of superiority or difference or anything else, Nigerians will let you know what time it is. They'll gladly remind you that, where the airport is or where you need to go. So it's a very interesting, tolerant, intolerant society. And even myself as a Nigerian, I've experienced both sides of it because, returning from, my sojourn abroad in the United States, United Kingdom, I was always viewed as a foreigner, even in my own land, which brought about its own set of challenges. But in terms of just the approach that one should have, it's about just having that perspective that it is what it is in terms of its the culture and the nuance of it. I think economically, Nigeria is also very diverse in that space. We've had energy, which is around oil and gas, fossils, and renewables have been the main revenue earner for us for the last 50, 60 years. So as a result of that, you've seen a sprout of industries that have come up and done exceptionally well in those particular areas and have boosted the economy in that sense. And then in the last 20, 25 years, we've seen gigantic boosts in the financial services and also telecommunication sectors as well. And then more recently, maybe in the last 4 to 5 years, you've seen gigantic strides in information technology and then also in the entertainment space as well. Wizkid and all these guys have become like internationally, recognized names. And that's just a testament to just how the culture, especially in the entertainment space, has grown. But without romanticizing Nigeria too much, it does come with its challenges. The government hasn't been too great in making sure that Nigerians have been well taken care of. So there have been economic challenges. There has been strife sometimes, as a result of just different things that, you see in what you would consider a country that is going through these challenges. I refuse to use the word developing nation because I have my own personal philosophies around what that term means. But yes, there are challenges, but at the same time, people do create opportunities out of these challenges, and they do fundamentally well for themselves. I've been living and working in Nigeria as a professional for quite a number of years now, and I know what it is like to go through the spectrum of every single aspect of positive and negatives, ups and downs. But in terms of avenues for business, for investors to come in, that's something that is definitely open. Fortunately, unfortunately, a lot of American businesses don't invest as much as other businesses from other parts of the world because there are like very strict State Department regulations around that. So what is highly encouraged is that if you want to come to Nigeria to do business, invest in Nigeria, you always want to make sure you check with the State Department or you have some kind of trusted source on ground that would help you navigate some of the challenges, especially around government regulations, permits, approvals, and things of that nature. So that's in terms of coming to Nigeria. And in terms of living here, quality of life, it is very diverse in the sense, abject poverty does exist. I don't want to sugarcoat that for 1 second. You will see people, who are very homeless, who are begging on the streets. You will see people living in, shanty towns and shacks and, very deplorable conditions. And then also at the same time, literally juxtaposed next to that, you see people living in homes that mirror that of what you see in Beverly Hills and other highbrow parts of any Western developed nation. So it's a very confusing, conflicting society, because you can literally go from abject poverty where you can't even imagine how people are surviving to literally somebody living like, the fabulous life of the rich and famous. That is the confluence of what I call the confusion and also at the same time, the contradiction that is Nigeria. And I think it's important people understand that so they know where they're coming, if they choose to come in and visit. Also at the same time, I think just traveling in is pretty straightforward. Every non-Nigerian and non-West African requires a visa to come in. So it's either you are holding a Nigerian passport or you are a member of the Economic Community of West African States. So for example, people from Senegal, Ghana, Togo, and other parts of West Africa can come in freely, but everyone else has to get a visa. You can pretty much get a visa from any of the Nigerian High Commission or Nigerian consulate or embassy locations in the States, in Washington, D.C., New York, Atlanta, Houston, LA. It's a pretty straightforward process. You can actually do it online. As long as you meet the requirements, you should be able to get a visa to come into Nigeria. United Airlines and Delta do fly both directly from Atlanta, New York, and DC into Nigeria. So you can get direct flights to Abuja and Lagos airports. Abuja is the capital, Lagos is the commercial capital. And it's a pretty long flight, not as short as, relatively short as Senegal. So it's like maybe a 12 to 13 hour hike. Or you can, if you don't want to do that at a stretch, you can easily fly into any one of the European locations via London, Paris, Frankfurt, or any of those locations, take a break and then fly to Nigeria. COVID protocols are pretty strict. Everybody must be vaccinated to come in. This is double vax, so you've had your 2 doses. If you haven't
we lost you again, Waji. You back?
I think it just went off. He probably lost service.
Okay. We'll
Hi,
wait to
can
see.
everyone?
Okay, we got you. You're back. Okay, good.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. What was the last thing you heard me say?
You were talking about how visas were relatively easy to get. You can go to any embassy.
And they have to get the double vax.
And you have to get right. That was the
Okay.
last thing, the vaccination.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so the vaccination, everybody needs to be double vaxxed to come in. If you're not double vaxxed, then you have to take a COVID test. You have to take COVID test before you come and take it 7 days after you come, and then you have to self-isolate within that. And the reasons being is because all our COVID issues were people who were traveling in. We didn't really have any internal COVID issues, so which is why they're still very, very strict on people coming in with COVID. Geopolitics, I must be honest, it's a hot mess. So that's something that I think is very important to state. So politically, Nigeria isn't there yet. But jokingly enough, a lot of Nigerians say, well, it's just as bad as the US right now, right? Especially Donald Trump era. So pretty much you have a lot of political challenges with the parties and everything else. And it's just trying to get stable. It can be unsafe sometimes. And I think for me, it's important to define safety. Nigeria is a very interesting country in the sense of crime. Crime is very sporadic and is very quick. It can happen at different places, but you can also sense it. So it's just being street smart, knowing where to go, knowing when to go, knowing who to go with. You know, and if you just pay attention to those rules of life, then I think you navigate Nigeria as a country relatively seamlessly. So that's in terms of geopolitics and also safety. Health and wellness. First and foremost, the weather. I absolutely love it. It's hot throughout the year. You know, the sun is beautiful. We have some wonderful beach locations, especially in the southern part of Nigeria, and then also some mountainous regions in the inner part of Nigeria as well, where you get some amazing weather. The rainy season is what it is. There's a lot of rain, and this year especially, we've had an exceptional amount of rain. Um, so also knowing when to come to Nigeria is important because the seasons do determine your experience when you come. Health and wellness, it's pretty much individual. You know, we don't have amazing healthcare here. It's still much of a challenge. There are some very good private hospitals, but they are very expensive and obviously not affordable for the general population. So health and wellness can be a challenge, but at the same time, there's a lot of preventative stuff as well, because a lot of our food is mostly organic. So people who eat properly, manage their stress well, and exercise, nothing ever happens to them. You know, so if you just follow those basic principles, then you should be fine, where you don't have to, you know, go to the doctor every time you're sick. But it can be challenging if you do have pre-existing conditions, especially like we saw during COVID. You know, most of the challenges we had around COVID were you know, people who had comorbidities or pre-existing conditions, and that can be a challenge. So I think for me, all in all, Nigeria is a wonderful place to visit. We're definitely seeing a lot of younger Howard alum come to Nigeria in most recent times. We call them digital nomads. These are people who just moved to Nigeria, mostly to experience the vibe, especially because of the things they've seen around music and entertainment and technology. So it's an interesting place. It's not for everyone, but it's definitely for those who, you know, want to just get a different kind of experience and a different kind of, you know, connection. And especially for African Americans, because I think you begin to understand some deeper senses of self once you begin to see Nigeria, because you get like a plethora ambush of just different cultures that you can now begin to connect to. So yeah, so that's it for me. I hope I've captured all the different elements, and my apologies for the connection, and I will be happy to take any questions at the point that it comes up. Thank you.
We appreciate that, Nawaji. We know it's sometimes very challenging. The audio is reliable. So we have Adrian George Lind from Sweden, and Adrian's in Sweden and she's having a little trouble too. So it's not just about you. So we'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation after Kim Jack Riley. So Adrian, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Claudette. If I'm like all my other fellow bison, I've just simply been blown away. I'm so proud of my baby bison, Ariana, Fatiana, and my brother in Nigeria. And I'm just so honored to be here. Thank you to Greg Mundy, who invited me. Got to give him a shout out. Sawandi, DC Statehood. Briefly, and I hope I can even run this. Yes, this is where Sweden is. A lot of people have heard of Sweden, but don't necessarily know where it is. It's in Scandinavia, northern Sweden. It is a part of the EU. We are trying our best to scramble into NATO, thanks to Russia and their latest aggression. And I like to call Sweden all-inclusive. So I can briefly say, when we talk about healthcare, education, it's like 5-star all-inclusive. You prepay whether you're going to buy into it or not via your taxes. And we have some of the highest taxes in the world, but if I have a child under 18, she's going to get braces thanks to my taxes. It's not going to come out of my pocket. They don't have to pay tuition fees. I'm sorry, they don't have to pay tuition, but you still have fees, housing, books, all inclusive. When I'm old, I know I'm going to go to that old folks home and they're going to take care of me when it comes to healthcare. I show up and I've got like a little, what we would call, what do we call that? A copayment. My prescriptions are and that's limited I shouldn't say limited, it's maxed out at a certain amount. So for example, I got both my bunions taken off. Not at the same time, they won't do that, but 1 year. So from that first appointment, I went in. So I had no hospital bill. It was in my taxes, high, pre, 5-star, all inclusive. Same thing with, and I think the way they get over on you, when you go to H&M or whatever store you're shopping at, that price you see on the tag on that item of clothing, that's the price you pay at the register. There is no more tax on top of that. Then you look at your receipt and you see, oh God, I paid 25% tax. I'm going to pay 6%, I think, at the liquor store, or don't quote me on this, maybe 6% for travel, forget what it is on food, but the price that you see on that item is the price you pay when you walk out the door. Quickly, my work, see, now I'm not sure, we're going to see if this works. Okay. My work here in Sweden is I came to Sweden, okay. I lived in London. As Swandi said, I'm from DC. So I grew up in DC when it was Chocolate City, went to Howard, can't nobody tell me nothing. So I lived in London, I lived in Brussels, I lived in Sweden. I know exactly who I am, right? Whenever I go home, I bring my grits back, my Jiffy cornbread. I make sure I have my things here, but I know exactly who I am. So when people ask you those weird questions of like, where are you from? And you say the US, they're like, no, but where are you really from? I'm like, well, I have the family Bible back from the 1800s. And, you know, I'm as American as the other person. And I have been in cocktail parties where the people say, oh, well, you're not fat because Black women are fat. And so you deal with that, you know, and then you, like I say, I'm from Chocolate City and I'm from DC. And I'm like, you know, have you even been out of Sweden? You know, I'm a world traveler, so I'm comfortable in my skin, and that's prepared me to be able to do things. My husband's a military officer. We live on the west coast of Sweden. Stockholm is the capital, financial capital, cultural capital. So we were there because he was stationed there. So I did the Stockholm expat blog just to say they don't necessarily recognize Indigenous Peoples Day in Sweden, but the government of Sweden knows that they have a problem. They are indigenous people here, the Sami people up north. They have to fight for how they're gonna migrate their reindeer. They, you know, I watched a ceremony on TV when the government gave back a burial land. So the struggles over here. So I would like to put Sami people at the top of the list, but included in this program, where do they say it's against Afrophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Gypsyism? You know, when I lived in California, I was better off being African-American than being Mexican-American, the way they treated the Mexican-Americans. Same thing here in Sweden. I'm much better off being an American than being indigenous. Definitely better off than being Jewish. And the way the Europeans treat the Romania people, the Gypsies, horrible. Islamophobia is ridiculous here. The Sami people are the indigenous people. So the Swedish government recognizes that there's a problem. A lot of people don't necessarily have faith in the Swedish government that they're going to be able to help everyone be treated equally. Sweden's got excellent public relations, and I wouldn't say that Sweden isn't an ideal place to live. But when we talk about culture and moving from the States, and I think we talked about this in our previous call, you know how, you know, you do the Black people nod, you know, you see people, when you just, you know, Swedes, you can be walking on a nature trail, they'll stare, 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 you say hello, they won't say anything. But I had to dive into Swedish culture to get my head around that, and they believe in giving you your space. So I know when I'm on the street and I make eye contact with Black people and I say something, I've had them run up to me almost literally and hug me because they're like, oh, Swedes don't do that. I'm like, Black people not. Black people not. Politics in Sweden have changed dramatically. I moved here, I met my Swede, I was living in Brussels, 2005. I moved here 2006. It was a socialist country. Now it is a right-wing country, like a lot of Europe. I like to say where the US leads, Europe follows. So thank you, Trump, and all of that Tea Party stuff that we lived through. Now the party that was rooted in Nazism is the second largest party here. They have a place at the table. And they do what all of these nationalist parties do. We want Swede for Sweden. We want Sweden for Swedes, I should say. We want to take care of our old people. We want to make sure that our kids can get educated. They put forward these arguments that are very hard to say, well, I don't want Swede, who doesn't want our old people taken care of? So they have gained power. What I have found is that a lot of immigrants vote for this party, because my immigrant story is different. It's a lot like my sister Nengadef in Senegal. I moved here for love. I had ABBA, I knew Sweden, I knew it was a country. I had no intention of living there. I wasn't a refugee. I moved to Belgium, to Europe for work. And so coming here, when I came, it was very welcoming. I do know that Sweden, more than the US and any other country, took a huge amount of Syrian refugees, and it stressed the system. And there's been some fallout from that. I want to keep my time short for the Q&A. Just a little plug. I went off the screen, but a little plug. Black Women in Europe blog is something I started when I moved here from Brussels, because I had to find my people. So it started off as a research project, turned into a social network. When Michelle Obama was named the most powerful woman in the world on Time magazine, I started a Black Women in Europe power list. My anniversary was, my 15-year anniversary was last year. That's when I launched the blog. I'm sorry, the podcast. It's on Anchor FM /BWIE. So I took the blog off from I took it to another dimension so we can actually hear these voices of these women and telling their stories. Lastly, any bison on here that lives abroad who has not already requested their absentee ballot to vote, there are two responsibilities I would like to say that Americans abroad have. One of them, if you don't know, you have to file your taxes. You are in violation if you are not filing your taxes. Do you have to pay taxes? Depends on your financial situation. I don't have to pay taxes because I'm not making that much money, but I have to file. Us and Eritrea are the only two countries that force their non-resident citizens to have this obligation. It's not funny for a lot of people. I actually know people who have renounced their American citizenship, but we all know on this call, Bison, I ain't giving up my citizenship. That was hard fought, not hard won. I will file my taxes. I will pay my taxes if that's what when you crunch the numbers. So please if you're a bison abroad, please make sure you are filing your taxes. Second responsibility as a bison abroad is vote. Vote. Go to fvap.gov. We have a federal right. It's not good enough for you to just say, oh, I want a regular absentee ballot. You need to say, no, I want the overseas ballot, because we are federally protected. If that ballot doesn't come, for example, it didn't come for me in 2008 in Stockholm when I was voting for Obama. So I used my federal write-in emergency absentee ballot. I printed it out. I filled it out. 2 days later, my ballot came. That's in my scrapbook. So we have a responsibility to vote. I'm a member of the Democratic National Committee. Midterms matter. Yes, they do, Maria Jones. Everything matters. Your school board matters, right? A lot of states, you have the sheriff. The whole justice system is based on who you vote for. So that's my message that I want to say. And finally, I do have one last thing I want to say. As was mentioned on my slide, my parents met at Howard in the 50s. So I'm in that serious sandwich situation. We lost Daddy last year at 95. My mom's 90. Oh, I'm not going to say because I think she's on this call. And ladies never say their age. But you're going to move abroad at some point. You got to come home, take care of your parents. So keep that in mind as well when you do that Black Sit thing. And I love you, Bison. Thank you for letting me be a part of homecoming.
Adrienne, thank you so much. And we really appreciate Greg, who's a charter member of the Capstone Group, for inviting you to participate participate. So we're going to turn it over to Kim Jack Riley, who's another proud Bison. After Kim speaks, we're going to open the floor up to questions, and we welcome people to stick around, share in the questions and the knowledge exchange. Kim, it's all yours if you're ready. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, and happy homecoming to everybody. Thanks for having me. And it really has been a very enriching conversation that we've been hearing from everybody. So unfortunately, I think most of the things I probably would have covered have been said, but I've also learned a lot too, so thank you. But that said, because time is sort of against us at the moment, I really wanted to focus on some of the practicalities of actually moving. And so I am, as we said, I live in England. I'm born in England and lived in America for a number of years, but I just happen to be in Cyprus this week. So I'm coming to you from Cyprus, but I'm sort of talking about the UK. So while I think everybody in America pretty much has some knowledge of the UK, rightly or wrongly, you know, there's always miscommunications as well, but there's a sort of a love-hate relationship between America and the UK as well that we have to sort of deal with on a day-to-day basis. So that said, it's actually not that easy to move from the US to the UK. And I've also experienced the reverse because I first, you know, moved from the UK with my family, my parents, to the US. So I know the whole process of what it takes to get a green card in America and vice versa now, because I had to sponsor my husband. I know how intense and how involved it is to try to move from America to the UK. So I think that it's really important for the purpose of this program, and it has been said earlier in this conversation, you know, how do you just move? You know, how do you get over your fear of moving, and how do you actually do it? So if anyone is thinking about the UK, there are so many similarities to America, again, good and bad. But one of the similarities is that the government is making it harder and harder and harder. They sort of keep moving the goalpost of what the requirements are to move to the UK. So I'm sure that I'll miss a few, but there are some very basic can-do ways. One, of course, would be if you happen to have been born here in the UK. The other is that there's also a birthright entrance that you can get, which is what my daughter got. So because she's my daughter, so by birth, she was born in the US, but she was also entitled to British citizenship. So she's technically a dual citizen. And that's another conversation about whether that's a good thing to have or not. The third route would be a spousal route, which I just touched on. So I am the British citizen, and then my husband is American. So I am able to sponsor him to move and live in the UK. And then really the other routes get a little bit fuzzy. There's not all that much after that you can do if you really want to live and settle and remain in the UK. You've got obviously student routes, and you've got even employment and working routes. But again, because of the similarities between countries, you know, we're all going through a recession. So employment, there aren't that many employers who are willing to sponsor foreign people to live and work in their countries if it's taking away from jobs that they believe a national would have. So I think you have to really, with that in mind, you really have to first do the self-analysis and say, why do I want to move to this country? Or why did I select this country that I'm going to move to? What for? So I'll just shift, you can all think about that for yourselves, but I would say that I wanted to mention, I live now in Brighton, even though I'm a Londoner, and even that choice selection is a really, really big one. When you are moving to a country as it's geographically small, but it's intense and dense, the UK that is, in terms of things that are happening and things that are going on in towns and villages and politics and economics. So there's hundreds of different choices that you have to make in terms of where in the UK do you want to live. So we specifically chose Brighton, for me, because, well, for us as a family, we were priced out of London. London is New York, Paris, San Francisco in terms of prices. So second to that, we then started to go down the rest of the list, which is, well, is there diversity? Is there arts and culture, that we're interested in? What's the sort of international scope of the people and mentality of the people that live there? So all these things were striking as a yes for Brighton. And earlier in the questions, Saikwan had mentioned the LGBT community. And that really is one of the, I think, great attributes about Brighton as a city, is that it's sort of the capital for LGBTQ within the UK. And has really, through very difficult challenges and struggles, has now gained great sort of status in terms of being welcoming, being inclusive. So all these things have fallen into what makes Brighton, Brighton. From an arts and entertainment perspective, it's actually sort of now the geographic first step that, so if anyone's touring from elsewhere in the world, they usually come to the Brighton venues first and then move to London and usually afterwards go north to Edinburgh, for example. So again, we are not missing much of the structure that we had living in New York City by being in Brighton. Again, it's not for everyone though. So if you're looking, there is a beach, and that was one of my requirements because I worked with the Caribbean for a long time in the travel industry. But it's not a sort of, you wouldn't swim in the water, let's just say, nor is the climate swimmable. But it's similar to actually San Francisco, where it still is the ocean. You still get to look at it every day. And it's a very, very seaside culture that surrounds the daily lives of people in Brighton. So those are the points that I wanted to really get across, is that don't jump into the fantasy of moving somewhere based on a holiday. Again, another question that was brought up earlier was really just to say, what's the best way to start? And my advice to do that, in fact, is what we did and how we discovered Brighton. We came to Brighton on a day trip. We always would go to London. That's where my family is. That's where, I know everything. And then one day we were thinking about Brighton. So it's like, well, let's take the train. It's 1 hour from London to Brighton going south. So we took the train to Brighton for a day trip, and it was the worst imaginable experience that you can ever think of. It was peak tourist season. The train was basically standing room only. People just were like pushed out the train like sheep, herded down towards the beach, which is sort of like a one route main road that you go. You get to the beach, it was, shoulder to shoulder, and the food sort of capitalists are sort of pouring bad food at you for expensive prices. So it was just everything we hated about bad tourism. We went back to London and sort of wrote off Brighton. But then an opportunity came for us to come to Brighton during off season. And this is where I get to what do I recommend as to how. And the how is to take an Airbnb. In our case, that was 4 weeks. So we had a month in Brighton in essentially a house, and essentially had to, cook dinner, go to the supermarket, find our way and find our bargains where we needed them for clothing and transportation and that sort of thing. And so it was that experience that brought out the best that Brighton had to offer and said, oh, this is a place we really, really could live. So that's really my advice, hopefully for you to take away, is to do that before you take the leap. Spend 2 weeks even, but hopefully at least a month in an environment that's not a hotel, so that you can just basically live like the people live. And with that, all the questions that we've had today in sort of categories such as the politics, the weather, the health situations, all of these things will be completely evident and transparent to you because you'll be living like the people live. And so I'm just in the essence of time, I'll sort of leave it there and be happy to answer any questions about life in the UK, moving to the UK, or living in Brighton or visiting.
Kim, share with us a little bit about your new tea ventures.
My new tea venture, because I've had a really, really, really diverse career since Howard, which was the School of Communications. So we're sort of fast forwarding over all of that because alongside that career, I've always wanted to open my own tea shop. And living in America, I embarked on a series of course studies and became a certified tea sommelier. The plan was when we moved back to England, now being, fully credentialed, I'd been doing it on the side for many years in America, that being tea tastings and tea workshops and that sort of thing. I thought, this is it. I'm going to move back to England. I'm going to open a tea shop. But then, as others today have expressed, COVID hit. And I wasn't able to do a bricks and mortar tea shop as planned. But out of necessity comes opportunity. So now I have launched, and we launched it over the summer very successfully. It's a mobile tea room. So we sort of have a gazebo and we go out to fairs and markets and we set up a stall and we deliver tea and sandwiches. But the main ingredient that is so important, it's not Victorian afternoon tea. It is tea through the eyes of a person of color, a person who's of international mixed heritage, and I infuse all sorts and introduce all sorts of teas from all around the world, not just China and India, but really highlighting my own Caribbean heritage and of course, African teas and cultures. So that's the twist element to my tea venture. And it's sort of the message there is don't be afraid to travel, don't be afraid to move to a different place, but whilst you're doing it, let your dreams come to the top as well and push them out there while you've got the opportunity.
Thank you, thank you. So we're going to open up the floor to questions and anybody can feel free to jump in if you've got a response to it. Saquon, you've been monitoring the chat. Can you share with us some of the questions that are popping?
Yes, and if there's an option at the bottom as well. If you have a question on the call or on a Zoom, you can just raise your hand so that way I can see it. So we'll start with the chat. The first question is from Maria. Can anyone of the panelists or audience members that live in Africa address the perceived or real divide between African Americans and continental Africans? How do we address or heal that? heal that?
I guess I can answer. This is a really interesting question that I get asked a lot. And I think that from my personal experience, I've never felt any divide or judgment, or I see conversations on Twitter in the diaspora war, so I know what people are referencing, but I personally haven't experienced it. My first time coming, I felt more so well, I was in a program where we were linked up with kind of like college students who were studying English, so they may have had more exposure to American culture and things like that. But I saw more so curiosity, and also seeking kinship, wanting to bond over hip hop or knowing 50 Cent lyrics. I saw a desire to want to bridge the gap. So I've never felt any discomfort being African American, any divide or any like insecurity about that in my experience in Senegal. I'm sure it's not universal, but it's something that, yeah, I've never really faced, that I think I have built up in my mind, seeing the conversations online, and it just wasn't the case for me.
And now that we have Nwaji on camera, I'd like for him to address that. Go ahead, brother, my fellow Bison.
All right. I love Tiana's answer because I think it's very accurate, but I also think it's kind of accurate from a generational point of view. One of the things I've noticed is that a lot more younger people no longer have that dialectic that definitely existed during my time, you know, when I was at Howard and also as a young individual. So I think Tiana speaks to a more current situation where you are seeing a lot more fusion and a lot more tolerance and acceptance. There was something recently where Usher was in Ghana, performing in Ghana and in Accra. You have all sorts of African Americans that come to Nigeria. I mean, every day I'm seeing some new person in Nigeria entertaining, dancing, and all sorts of different things. So, but I do think that there is some historical truth to that. There was that, you know, those issues. I personally experienced it. I mean, I experienced it from being Nigerian and you know, getting called African bush monkey and all that nonsense, you know, back in the early 90s. And then I also experienced it as a Nigerian, being around Nigerians who equally had derogatory things to say. And then I also experienced it as a Nigerian in Nigeria, being referenced as an African American, which I always found quite interesting. So these things do happen, have happened. I do think it's getting better. And I think Tiana speaks to the sheer amount of progress that has been made. You know, you see a lot more collaborations, music, entertainment. So I do think it's come a long way, and I definitely hope that it continues in that upward trajectory towards positivity.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to answer that question? Or if not, we can move on to the next one. Okay. So the next question is for Tiana. It said, what is one thing you learned about yourself after taking that leap of faith?
I think I learned to trust myself. Like I had these hunches and feelings that I kept like in my journal, that I want to travel and I want to learn language and I want to do these things, but I hid it. I didn't talk about it. It's not something that I wanted to share. That part of my life was separate, and I kept the track going for the public to see. And when I took those leaps, my family didn't understand. They were concerned. They were like, where did this come from? What's going on? And I had to kind of keep my head down and protect that space because I knew people wouldn't get it, but I trusted myself enough to take the leap. And now that I've been able to secure it for myself, people have been able to see what I was seeking and the beauty I saw in Senegal, the beauty I saw in the travels. And like my family went from like, I can't take that flight, that's too far, I don't know, to purchasing land within like a month of having visited. So I think trusting myself was the biggest lesson. And also preserving, like not being afraid to keep it to yourself, because not everybody will get it. And I know I'm sensitive, so sometimes those comments can throw you off even when you know what you want for yourself.
That was good. Thank you. The next question, each of you stated how welcoming these places are. How often and welcoming are they for the LGBTQ plus community? So any panelists can answer that.
I can say Sweden is very open to it. And actually, my husband, as a military officer, works with at least one fellow officer who went through his transgender or their transgender operation and was able to maintain their rank and status. And it also happened when he was on assignment in the United Kingdom. A pilot, I can't remember his name, John, I think went from John to, can't remember his name, but he confided in my husband, and then at one big event said, you know, I'm going to make this transition. So I at least know that he was supported, and in Sweden, it's not a big deal to be gay.
Thank you. Anyone else want to respond to that question?
I'll just add again that Brighton is definitely a huge leader in any issues related to LGBTQ community, and UK in general, I would have to say, are in fact leaders on many of the issues involving that community.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question in the chat. It said, what was the hardest adjustment you had to make?
I'm going to hop in and just build on what I said about Sweden, about Swedes stare. And that was something that I had to, because you question, are they staring at me? Is it something in my nose? Is my dress in my underwear? Is it because I'm Black? And then if you observe, you realize they stare at each other as well. And it's just something they do. And they have this philosophy of giving people space. So they may look, and have a question, but they're not going to answer the question. That was the hardest thing. The second hardest thing was getting used to the short days and during the winter and the long days during the summer. So blackout curtains are definitely necessary in the summer. You know, you're with your friends and it's 10 o'clock at night and their kids don't want to go to bed because they're like, well, the sun's still up. So you have to adjust for that. And I've never lived up north where they have 24-hour sun or 24-hour darkness. That, and then also the first time I spent Christmas here, I'll never do that again. I can't remember how many Christmases I've had here. They celebrate on the 24th. And you're like, what are you talking about? Christmas is the 25th. So everything happens on the 24th. And then, you know, I'm like, where's my handle Messiah? You know, I grew up, like I said, my parents met at Howard. I didn't elaborate that they were music majors. So my house is always full of music. So I'm like, where's Handel's Messiah? You know, so getting over the fact that you can't have your traditions, but then you're there with your new family and you don't want to be the little one sucking the life out of the room, you know, with the powder in your face. So that's very hard. So I realized that save your money so you can go home and celebrate those things that are important with you, that other people that get it. But also a tip for adjusting to the hardest things in your culture is find an American Women's Club. I have made friends with women who would have never talked to me in the US, but we got Thanksgiving together. We have 4th of July together. We have those moments that make us, that we can, it makes it a little easier. It's like a little balm on being where you are, because that's the thing. You can maybe think you're running from whoever you are at a new country. The grass is the same grass, it's just a different shade, and you are who you are. So it's okay to look out and find those people who have those shared values, even if you would never be friends with them otherwise. I hope that was relevant.
Thank you.
I have one kind of related to one of her points, but on the opposite end in terms of personal space. This is kind of on the lighter side, but people tend to get very close to you here when you're in line at the grocery store. Like you may be at about to hand your card and they be standing directly behind you or in front of you, like as if they've already checked out. So that's something that's taken me some time to not like take personally or not feel as like it's a threat, just to kind of laugh with it. I always get cut in line because I'm not aggressive enough. So that's kind of on the lighter side, that sometimes I just have to laugh at it now and not get up in arms. And on the more challenging or like taxing side, I would say the language for me. I studied French at Howard, but it's a different thing of trying to live and operate. And then also trying to learn Wolof because my in-laws, for the most part, like my mother-in-law, French isn't really a common language between us, so I have to learn Wolof. So sometimes it's like when you're for a study abroad program, you're there to try to learn a language. But when you're living your day-to-day life, you don't always want to have to rehearse what you're gonna say to order your food or rehearse what I'm gonna say to my mother-in-law. So sometimes that can get exhausting, but I recently had a bit of a breakthrough with Wolof especially. So I'm relieved to finally be comfortable doing my greetings, asking questions, being a lot more at ease. But in the beginning, it was very isolating and frustrating. You don't always want to have to think that hard, but just to do simple things. So I would say those are two for me.
We go to the next question is, how safe do you feel? What about public safety?
I'm just going to jump in there, and I must send my apologies, but it's 8 p.m. here in Cyprus, and I've got to jump to an event. So I'll be saying goodnight as soon as I finish this. But this is such an important question, especially for the UK. Safety, I think that, everyone everywhere has to maintain a sense of street sense these days. So there is danger and there is crime certainly existing in the UK. It's sometimes different because there's not the same gun access that there would be in America. So personally, I do feel safer for the fact that I'm not always afraid of someone having a gun. It's really noticeable, for example, on the underground, which we call the underground or the tube, but then you would say the subway, in New York. But just being on a tube or a subway late at night, and it was a deprogramming that I had to do to say to myself, oh, the people sitting across from me on this train don't have guns. Whereas if I was in New York, that's the first thing I'd be worried about if I was on a train, definitely after, sundown or anything. So what there is here is definitely knife crime. Stabbings are definitely an issue. And I really think that, I hope in a respectful manner. As we all know, as people of color, there are certain sort of stereotypes and categories that we can be locked into for blame of certain crimes. And so, rather than segregate that racially, I think that the knife crime is driven by poverty, lack of access to basic human needs. Gangs are definitely in action in cities here. So it is unfortunate if that should all fall under the umbrella that those also might be people of color, because it's definitely a general issue. And again, I do think that safety is something everyone everywhere should be always conscious of and being careful of. So I'll leave you with that. Sorry, it would be a good dialogue, but I really have to go. I'm so sorry. So hope everyone will find, I was just trying to type that quickly. Do try and find me on LinkedIn, please, to keep in touch. Or you can find me easily on Facebook as well. I'm pretty much K Jack Riley or Kim Jack Riley in most of the social media formats. Bye. Good night. It's 8 p.m. here. Bye.
We have
Bye,
one last.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We have one more question. Saquon, go ahead.
Can panelists talk about challenges and opportunities for pursuing job opportunities or becoming a consultant? I am a journalist, communication professional.
Yeah. Let me jump in there. And I think for me, the best advice is to partner with people that live and work in the professional space, build very solid networks. Fortunately, nowadays we have LinkedIn and all these other social media platforms that you can just get to know different professionals. You can do your independent investigation, and you can pretty much build solid networks as consultants and everything else. So it's definitely, the opportunities are there, not just in Nigeria, definitely in places like Senegal, all over Europe, the Caribbean. It's literally just a function of reaching out to people and getting a sense of what you're looking for, and then trusting that person enough to just make the connection and make the dots. It's just being smart business-wise, developing relationships. And I think more importantly, it's also about what value proposition do you bring? What is your unique selling point? I think unfortunately, and I just need to say this, a lot of Americans believe that just being American is enough to open opportunities for business in different parts of the world. And, I'll shock you with the fact that, there's been so much advancement, especially in technology and communications and so many of the things that you need to be coming with something that does add value, that does distinguish you from everyone else, because they can easily hire those resources locally where they do not have to, tinker with their expatriate quota or pay you in US dollars and things like that. So if you're looking for those opportunities, you have to be coming with a value proposition that is going to either make the company money or save the money or make them more productive. That's something that I, as a consultant, definitely advise. Skill sets are no longer, skill sets are everywhere. The person down the street could do coding. They can format anything that you can think of. I'm sure Tiana and everyone else can speak to that. You'd be absolutely shocked the skill sets that exist in different parts of the world. So it's the value proposition that you bring, and I think that's a function of networks and access to funding and things like that that definitely give you that opportunity.
I have to hop in here from Sweden because my Bison, Nuaji, he touched on it. And Americans I know in Sweden, at least when, I've been here for 18, oh my God, almost 17 years. But when you first, come in, they're thinking they're going to get a job right away. They got a master's degree from Harvard or whatever, Howard, Harvard. I've only met one Bison here, so I shouldn't say Howard, but they assume, and this is primarily my European Americans that think that they're American, they're special. You're not special at all. Everybody in Sweden from the age of 18 up, 7 up, speaks Swedish. You might meet somebody speaks English very, very well, not as well as they think, but very well. And it's only you're going to meet somebody maybe 80 who's going to not want to speak English to you. So it is definitely research where you're going to go. My friends who've had the most success they speak IT. They're IT. IT is their own language. Right? Eller hur, as we say in Swedish, or not. Right? That's I'm in marketing communications. I can't do that in Swedish. I know Americans that can't do what I do in English. I worked in London. That's how I got hired, because I could write a press release. So your skills aren't necessarily transferable. Your degrees, you have to get them, certified through the government as the equivalent. They're not so special. Swedes aren't necessarily impressed. So that is something that you have to keep in mind. And for me, it made me go entrepreneurial. But again, I'm from DC. I went to Howard. I got my master's in, communication. I could do my own thing, but what I could not do is get hired by the regular company. And I had a headhunter who was so impressed with my credentials. You know how it always is, till they meet you face to face. You have that coffee, and they're like, "Oh my God, Swedes, we're not racist, but we wouldn't know what to do with you at the coffee hour." So that's one reason being a Bison. You're like, "Oh, I know who I am. That's okay."
Right.
Missed out.
Yeah.
So
Adrian,
to that point, Nigeria recently made some decisions about managing, controlling images in Nigeria and what's going to be the dominant presentation. Can you talk a little bit about how that's going to impact the Nigerian community and dealing with internationals?
So let me communicate, because I think it's a bit misinterpreted. So Nigeria has actually had that perspective for decades.
Can you share? Other people may not be familiar what happened.
Yeah, so basically there was a release recently that the Nigerian government or Nigerian media space was going to primarily use Nigerian models for advertising and things of that nature. So they're looking for predominantly Nigerian models, dark-skinned models and everything else. But the point I wanted to make around the correction of that is that has actually been the policy, unspoken policy for decades. Anybody who has visited Nigeria, and I also think Dakar, you will see a lot of the advertisements for beauty products, for skin products, especially when it comes to women, are usually very dark-skinned models and everything else. It's actually something that affronts you when you first visit these countries, especially when you're driving on highways and you see big billboards. So I think what Nigeria was just trying to reiterate was that they're not apologizing for it, because I think they got caught up on it by some, I don't know, European committee that said, isn't this racist? And they said, we don't know what you mean by racism. We're just focusing on what we believe we want to project, that if we're going to sell Nigerian beauty products, or we're going to sell Nigerian entertainment, or whatever the case, we want it to be Nigerian models and Nigerian model. And more importantly, the Nigerians can look like me, they can look like Tiana, they can look like Ariana, they can look like Kim. You know, we cover every shade of black, you know, which is, you know, very interesting. So it's something I fully support, something I've always believed in, because I think it's important for those images to be Nigerian focused, especially given the numbers that we have. So it's just a question of focusing on giving opportunities to Nigerians, because I think it came from, I know where it came from actually, and I'll just share that here. There was a group that was trying to bring in some South African models to Nigeria for a particular campaign. And like I told you, Nigeria were a very intolerant society. So that was the intolerant side coming in, like, oh, you've got the bloody nerve to even try that. So that's kind of what influenced that decision and around the focus that we're doing. And more importantly, and this is a very, very critical point, it doesn't exclude Black people from across the globe. I want to make that point very, very clear. Okay, it doesn't exclude Black people from across the globe. So if you happen to have the hue of what is considered to be African, then you are definitely qualified to be part of that campaign.
Wonderful. This has been a very lively conversation. I'm sure it could go on for hours. We do have some business to take care of. I'm hoping the panelists can stick around, but I want to shout out to some of the people who are joined us and give them a chance to say hello. We have Jamila McFarland from Jamaica. Dr. McFarland, how are you? Thanks for joining us this afternoon. If you want to pick the mic up and just say hello and give a shout out. I know you're here supporting Ariana. We also have future doctors, Malcolm and his brother, who have escaped the war in Ukraine, also as medical nomads, medical students currently living in Guyana. If you want to come off mic, you can say hello this morning. I think we should do a topic about that in the future. Malcolm, if you can hear us and you want to say hello.
Hello, how are you?
Okay, how is it going in Guyana? You've been a transplant here just within the past month from the Ukraine. These gentlemen walked, you hear me? Walked from Kiev during the height of the war to safety in Poland. They have a story to tell about their medical education journey. So at some point, we may bring them back as guest speakers. I also see on the call that we have Tony Blockman, who was one of our presenters last year. Tony, do you want to say a shout out?
Yes, greetings everyone. I am in Harlem, New York, Troy White's old stomping grounds. I'm preparing to head back to Dakar, Senegal pretty soon. I came here for artist residencies and I'll be going back for some events and festivals. So yeah, shout out to the Bison family. Globally, we are everywhere, y'all, everywhere.
And we're gonna keep this link going.
And the network is so important. I believe someone was just talking about it. And don't be shy when you're in a different country. Howard people are almost always happy to see you. So don't be shy when you're going somewhere. Look for Howard folks and reach out to them.
All right, thank you. Troy, do you want to say hello? Doing big things with IT in Africa. How's it going in Kenya these days?
Good morning, good afternoon to all my beautiful HU blessed people. I'm actually not in Nairobi right now. I'm in Miami for a convention. But yeah, if anyone knows, I'm a huge advocate of us visiting the continent and discovering different places and possibly living there. I've been living in Kenya for 8 years, and I've also lived in London. I've lived around the States, and Kenya to me is the best place in the world to live. Like weather-wise, the people, the opportunities. It's just a dope spot. So if anyone's interested in visiting my lovely country, just hit me up. I put my information in the message board. And God bless all my beautiful people. And I love y'all.
We thank you. We thank you. Nawaji may be competing with you for some visitors, so we'll figure it out.
Well, that's it for our event. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to become a member of the Capstone Group or make a donation to our scholarship fund, click on the link below. Take good care and enjoy.